The Whisper After the Door. Synopsis. In an old country house, a group of friends decides to use an Ouija to contact the spirit of a child who, according to the local legend, mysteriously disappeared decades ago. What begins as a game becomes a nightmare when the planchette begins to move alone, revealing family secrets, betrayals, and a dark past that still seeks revenge. As the tension grows, the protagonists must face their own fears and the possibility that they have opened a door that they cannot close. Chapter 1. The Arrival. The road extended between withered wheat fields and bare trees as if the landscape itself had decided to remain silent before the arrival of winter. The car advanced slowly, his headlights barely illuminating the fog that swirled in the gutter. Inside, the atmosphere was a mixture of emotion and nervousness. No one said it out loud, but they all felt the same concern. Something in that old house at the end of the road seemed to wait for them. "Safe that is here?" asked Lucia, clenching the steering wheel until the knuckles got white. "That says the GPS," Sergio replied, looking at his mobile with distrust. "Although I doubt Google Maps know of ghosts." A nervous laugh toward the car but went out quickly. Behind, Paula and Marcos exchanged a look. They had heard the stories. The house of the Ortega, abandoned for more than 30 years, was famous in the town for the legend of the missing child. No one remembered his name, but everyone talked about their laughs in the halls of doors that closed alone and a whisper after the main door as if the past had not finished leaving. The car stopped in front of the oxidized fence. Beyond, the house emerged from the fog like a sleeping animal. 2 floors of blackened stone, broken windows, the main door unleashed. A owl yelled in the distance and the wind waved the dried branches, hitting the walls with invisible fingers. "Listos?" asked Sergio, trying to sound carefree. "We are more like," Paula said, getting out of the car and adjusting the scarf. "If we don't do it now, we will never." Marcos took out the trunk backpack. Inside, wrapped in a purple fabric, there was the Ouija. No one knew where he had taken it from, but they all accepted their presence as if it were an inevitable part of the night. They entered into a row, lighting with flashlights. The floor creaks under its steps and the air smelled of dust and moisture. In the lobby, the shadows seemed to move to the rhythm of their breaths. They went up to the living room where a round table waited under a rickety lamp. There they deployed the board. "How do you remember the rules?" asked Lucia with a trembling voice. "Don't let go of the planchette," Marcos said. "Do not ask personal questions. And always say goodbye." "And if you don't want to leave?" Paula asked in a low voice. No one responded. Chapter 2. The Board. The living room, illuminated only by the trembling light of the candles, seemed to have lost its usual form. The shadows lengthened and shrunk to the rhythm of the flames, projecting impossible figures on the chipped walls. The air was impregnated with the smell of wet wood and ancient dust, and each breath felt heavy, as if the house itself observed them. Friends settled around the table, sitting in rickety chairs that creak under their weight. The Ouija rested in the center, its dark wooden surface carved with letters spent by time. The planchette, oval and light, seemed to wait for the contact of the fingers, like a sleeping animal about to wake up. "Are you sure you want to do it?" asked Lucia, throwing a nervous look at her friends. "Come on, Lucia," Marcos replied, forcing a smile. "It's just a board. If nothing happens, at least we laugh for a while." Sergio nodded, although his voice trembled slightly when speaking. "In addition, we have all heard the stories, but nobody has really seen anything. Maybe it's time to deny the legend." Paula, however, did not seem convinced. His eyes ran through the room, stopping in the darkest corners. He had grown up listening to the stories of the Ortega house, and although he never believed at all in them, that night he felt a strange weight in the chest. "If we notice something weird, we stop," he said finally, crossing his arms. Marcos replied and extended his hand so that everyone placed his fingers on the planchette. The contact was almost electric. A chill toward the circle, and for a moment, nobody dared to speak. Outside, the wind hit the window with force, causing the candles to flash and the shadows dance even more. "Is there anyone here with us?" asked Sergio, his voice just a whisper. The silence lasted, broken only by the crunch of the house and the accelerated heartbeat of the hearts. The planchette did not move. Paula released a nervous laugh. "Are you?" "No problem." But before the phrase could finish, the planchette slipped gently towards the yes. The 4 looked at each other, incredulous. "Who has been?" asked Lucia, looking at Marcos. "It's not me," he said, raising his hands. "I swear." Paula pushed her hand away, but the planchette remained motionless. The atmosphere in the room became colder, and an air streamed toward the room, turning off one of the candles. "I don't like it," Paula murmured. Sergio, trying to recover control, put his fingers again on the planchette. If there is someone here, can you tell us your name? La Planchette trembled as if doubting, and then began to move slowly, pointing to one letter after another. N-I-N-O. A sepulchral silence seized the room. Lucia swallowed. Are you the child of the legend? He asked, barely audible. The planchette turned into circles, then stopped in yes. Outside, the wind hit the window again, but this time the sound was different, as if someone or something scratched the glass. Paula got up from the table, unable to withstand the tension. This is crazy, he said, in a broken voice. We should stop. No, wait, Marcos insisted. If there really is someone here, maybe we can help you. What do you want from us? Asked Sergio, with a tense voice. La Planchette moved once more, faster. M-I-R-A. Look what? Asked Lucia. A dry blow resonated at the door of the living room, making them jump in their seats. Paula shouted and Marcos jumped up, looking towards the door. Have you seen that? He asked with exorbitant eyes. There is nobody, Sergio said, trying to look out the slit, but he only saw darkness. The tension was unbearable. Paula hugged herself, trembling. We shouldn't have come, he murmured. Overnquilla, Paula, Lucia said, trying to sound calm. If there is really a spirit, maybe you just want to communicate. Or maybe he wants something else, Paula replied, with tears in her eyes. The cold in the room increased suddenly. Everyone felt a chill to travel their backs. The planchette moved once again, spectacing slowly, N, or, S, T, to, N, S, or, L, or, S. They are not alone, Sergio read out loud, and his voice broke. The candles blinked violently and one of them went out suddenly. The living room was plunged into a gloom even dense. The whisper after the door became stronger, as if something or someone waited for his turn to enter. Marcos got up and went to the door, determined to open it, but Lucia stopped him. Don't do it, he said, his firm voice. We do not know what is on the other side. The group looked at each other, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. Outside, the wind kept howling and inside, the tension grew with every second that passed. The Ouija remained in the center of the table as an open wound, and everyone knew that what they just started would not be easy to stop. The night was just beginning and the feeling of danger was increasingly real. Chapter 3, The First Contact. The silence that followed Lucia's warning was almost unbearable. The group remained motionless, with his hand still ends over the planchette, as if letting it be unleashed something worse. Outside, the wind continued hitting the windows and branches of the trees scratched the facade of the house as invisible fingers looking for a crack where to enter. What do we do now? Paula whispered with a broken voice. I think we must continue, Marco said, trying to keep calm. If there really is someone here, maybe you want to communicate. Lucia nodded, although her heart was beating hard and her fingers trembled. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathed deep and gently posed his fingers on the planchette. Can you tell us who you are? He asked in a firm voice. The planchette remained still for a few seconds that seemed eternal. Then he began to move slowly, pointing to one letter after another, M. A. T. E. Oh. The four friends exchanged surprised looks. The name resonated in the room as an ancient echo. Matter, Paula whispered. Is that the name of the missing child? It seems yes, Sergio replied with frown. But what do you want from us? Let's ask him, Marco said, with a tone that tried to be brave but could not hide his nervousness. Matthew, can you tell us what happened to you? The planchette began to move faster, spelling words that froze the blood, T, R, A, C, I, or P, A, D, R, E. S. A chill toured everyone's back. Lucia felt that the air became denser as if the house itself closed around it. His parents betrayed him? Paula asked, with tears in his eyes. Because? The planchette stopped and then slid towards the word goodbye. But before someone could react, a dry blow resonated on the upper floor. All were paralyzed with the breath contained. Who is there? Shouted Sergio, getting up in a jump. No one responded, but the echo of the coo was repeated, followed by a barely audible whisper that seemed to pronounce a name. Matter? Asked Lucia in a trembling voice. The planchette moved again, this time with an unusual force, spelling V-E-N-G-A-N-Z. A. The cold in the room intensified and the candles blinked violently. A fleeting shadow crossed the hall and an icy sigh ran through Paula's neck. We have to get out of here, she said urgently. This is getting dangerous. But before they could get up, the door of the living room closed suddenly, leaving them trapped in the dark barely illuminated by candles. We can't go out, Marco said, hitting the wood. It is closed. Fear seized the group. The Ouija was still on the table, but now it seemed like a damn object, a door open to something that they could not control. Lucia looked at her friends, looking for strength where she didn't have them. "We must finish the session," he said in a firm voice. "We have to say goodbye." Everyone placed their hands on the planchette, which moved slowly towards the word, goodbye. But just when it seemed that the communication ended, a heartbreaking cry emerged from the shadows, a sound that did not seem human or alive. The four looked terrified. The cry was repeated, closer, more desperate. "Runs!" Sergio exclaimed, pulling Lucia's hand. Without thinking, they started running towards the main door, which now seemed more like an insurmountable barrier than an exit. Each step resonated with ghostly echoes, and the house seemed to close on them as a trap. Suddenly, the door opened suddenly, and a burst of cold air pushed them outward. Fallen on the floor, trembling, they looked back. The house seemed calm, but in its broken windows, fleeting shadows faded. "Near more," Paula said, with tears in his eyes. "I never play that board again." But Lucia knew that something had followed them, something that had not really fired. Something I expected, patient, behind the door. Chapter 4. The Following Shadow. The cold morning breeze hit their face as they moved away from the house. The silence between them was heavy, loaded with a mixture of fear, disbelief, and a strange feeling that something invisible stalked them. "Are we really safe?" asked Paula, breaking the silence in a trembling voice. "I don't know," Lucia replied, looking back, towards the dark silhouette of the house that was lost between the fog. "I feel that something follows us." Sergio and Marcos exchanged worried looks, but none said anything. The memory of the heartbreaking cry and the feeling of being trapped still froze their blood. Upon arriving at the town, each one went home in silence without daring to talk about the subject more than necessary. But the experience did not stay on that night. Little by little, strange things began to happen. Lucia was the first to notice that something was not right. In his apartment, objects moved without explanation and sometimes felt a cold presence behind her. One night, when he woke up, he saw a dark shadow in the corner of his room, which disappeared when he turned on the light. Paula began to have recurring nightmares with an empty-eyed boy who called her by name. At work, I felt someone watched and listened to whispers when I was alone. Sergio and Marcos also experienced inexplicable phenomena, noises in their homes, lights that blink for no reason, and a constant feeling of being monitored. Desperate, they decided to meet again to speak and find a solution. Lucia proposed to contact a priest of the town, known for her knowledge in the hidden. The priest received them seriously and warned them that the Ouija had not only opened a door but had invited a presence that would not easily go. "The Mateo child is caught among worlds," he explained. "His soul is full of pain and resentment. And now you are part of that story." He recommended a purification ritual at home to definitely close the contact, but warned them that the process would be dangerous and that they should be prepared to face their worst fears. The night of the ritual, the four friends returned to the Casa de Campo, armed with candles, incense, and the words of the priest. The house seemed even darker, and the air was loaded with an oppressive energy. While the priest recited the sentences, the planchette began to move alone, spelling words of supplication and threat. The walls echoed with shouts and regrets, and the temperature descended to the breath of those present visible. At a culminating moment, a translucent figure appeared in front of them, the Mateo child, with eyes full of sadness and fury. "Why do you bring me back?" he whispered in a broken voice. "Why don't you let me rest?" Lucia took a step forward with tears in her eyes. "We don't want to hurt you," he said. "We just want to help you find peace." Little by little, the figure began to fade, and the atmosphere calmed down. The priest concluded the ritual and a deep silence filled the house. When leaving, the four friends felt that a weight had risen. But they knew that the experience had changed them forever. Chapter 5. The Weight of Silence. The days after ritual were a mixture of relief and anxiety. Although the oppressive atmosphere of the house seemed to have dissipated, an invisible shadow persisted in their lives, a silent echo that sneaked into their thoughts and dreams. Lucia woke up every morning with the feeling that someone watched her, and sometimes found the planchette on her night table, although she was sure she had left her at home. Paula, on the other hand, fought against recurrent nightmares where the boy Mateo appeared. His empty eyes and his whispering filled the darkness of his room. Sergio and Marcos tried to resume their routine, but the inexplicable phenomena did not cease: noise at night, lights that blink for no reason, and a constant sensation of presence. The experience had marked them deeply, and the uncertainty about what they had really released tormented them. One afternoon, they decided to meet at Lucia's house to speak and look for answers. The conversation revolved around his fears and the need to understand what happened. We can't live like this, Lucia said in a firm voice. We need to understand what really happened that night. Paula nodded with tears in her eyes. It wasn't just a game. We opened a door that we should not open. Sergio suggested seeking professional help, but Lucia proposed to investigate on his own, collecting all possible information about the Ortega family and the legend of Mateo. For weeks, they consulted files, spoke with neighbors in search for old documents. They discovered that Mateo had disappeared in mysterious circumstances, and that rumors about family conflicts and betrayals circulated in the town since then. Each new track fed the feeling that the child not only sought revenge, but also justice and redemption. One night, while Lucia reviewed old newspapers, she felt a presence behind her. When turning, he saw a fleeting shadow that disappeared in the dark. A whispering voice pronounced his name, and a chill toured his body. He knew that the past was not dead, and that the whisper after the door was still alive, hoping to be heard. Chapter 6. The Confinement. The country house, which had been the stage of his nightmare, called the four friends again. This time not out of curiosity or a game, but for the urgent need to definitely close the door they had opened. Upon arrival, the atmosphere was more oppressive than ever. The air was loaded with dense energy, and the shadows seemed to move alive. The feeling of being observed was constant, and every step resonated as an echo in empty halls. I don't know if we can get out of here, Paula whispered, clinging to Lucia's arm. We have to try, Marcos replied, trying to keep calm. We cannot let this destroy us. The group met in the room, surrounding the table where the Ouija rested. The board seemed to absorb the darkness, and the planchette shone with a disturbing glow. The priest who had helped them before arrived with them, prepared to perform a closing ritual. He explained that Matthew's spirit was caught, but there was also something else, a shadow that fed on fear and despair. While the ritual started, the walls seemed to whisper, and an icy current toured the room. The planchette moved alone, spelling words of plea and threat. Suddenly the lights flanged and went out, plunging the house in an absolute darkness. The screams and regrets resonated from the upper floor, and a dark figure appeared on the door threshold. You can't go. The shadow came out. This house is mine. The group clung to each other, facing the terror that wrapped them. The fight to close the door between the worlds had begun, and only one of them could leave without wounds. Chapter 7. The Invisible Fight. The darkness thickened in the house, as if the shadow that threatened them absorbed all the light and hope. The screams and regrets echoed in the halls, mixing with the accelerated beat of their hearts. The priest, in a firm voice, continued to recite the prayers, trying to contain the force that manifest. You can't escape. The shadow wrinkled, his voice a cavernous echo that seemed to come from the same entrails of the earth. This house is my kingdom, and you are intruders. Lucia felt that something invisible held her, pressing her lungs and slowing her breathing. He tried to scream, but only a drowned whisper came out. Marcos and Sergio struggled to free themselves from the invisible pressure that kept them motionless, while Paula cried, clinging to Lucia. The priest raised a cross and a rosary, moving towards the shadow with determination. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I order you to retire and leave these innocents alone. The shadow twisted, emitting a cry that shook the walls and shuddered the ground. For a moment, the darkness seemed to go back, and a ray of light crossed the room. But the battle was not over. Suddenly, the dark figure threw himself to Marcos, who fell to the ground, unable to defend himself. Lucia and Paula ran to help him, while the priest continued with his prayers, sweating and trembling under the pressure of the evil force. We have to join. Lucia shouted. We can only defeat this together. The four friends took their hands, forming a circle around Marcos. They concentrated all their energy in resisting and maintaining faith and hope. The shadow shook, as if it were burned by an invisible light, and slowly began to fade, leaving behind a heavy and dense silence. When the light returned, the house seemed calmer, although fatigue and fear still weighed on them. Marcos, wounded but alive, joined difficult. I don't know how much I can resist, he said in a weak voice. This is bigger than we imagined. Lucia pressed her fists, determined not to give up. We'll let this shadow destroy us. Let's close this door at whatever it costs. Chapter 8. The Final Ritual. The house seemed to contain breathing while the group prepared for the ritual that they expected would end the nightmare that had wrapped them. The priest, with his serious and leisurely voice, explained every step, every word they had to pronounce to close the door between the worlds. This ritual is not just a ceremony, he said. It is a confrontation with the unknown. You must be prepared to face your deepest fears. Lucia felt a knot in her stomach, but nodded with determination. There was no going back. Paula, Sergio, and Marcos shared the same mixture of fear and hope. They placed candles around the table, incense that filled the air with a penetrating aroma, and began to recite the sentences that the priest had taught them. The planchette rested in the center, inert but loaded with a palpable energy. As the ritual advanced, the temperature descended sharply. The shadows on the wall seemed to lengthen and twist, and a barely audible whisper began to fill the room. "Matter," Lucia murmured. "We are here to help you find peace." The planchette began to move, spelling words that mixed plea and fury. "I don't want to leave." The priest raised his voice, ordering the presence to be departed, to let the living go. Suddenly, a translucent figure appeared in front of them, the Mateo child, with eyes full of sadness and anger. "Why do you bring me back?" he whispered in a broken voice. "Why don't you let me rest?" Lucia took a step forward with tears in her eyes. "We don't want to hurt you," he said. "We just want to help you find peace." The boy looked at each of them, and for a moment, the fury in his eyes seemed to give in, giving way to a deep sadness. "I have been caught in the dark too long," he said. "But I'm afraid of what is beyond." The priest continued with the sentences, and little by little, the figure began to fade. The temperature returned to normal and a deep silence filled the house. When the ritual ended, the four friends looked at each other, exhausted but relieved. They knew they had closed a dangerous door, but also that the experience had changed them forever. Chapter 9. Sacrifice. The calm that followed the ritual was ephemeral. Although Matthew's presence seemed to have dissipated, a darker shadow persisted, a force that had not given up so easily. The house, which had witnessed so much pain, seemed to demand a price for having disturbed its silence. The four friends gathered again, aware that something had to definitely close the door between the worlds. The priest explained that, to seal the portal, one of them should be offered as a link, a voluntary sacrifice to balance energies and allow Matthew's spirit to find peace. The air became dense and the weight of the decision fell on them like a slab. Nobody wanted to talk, but everyone knew that the only way to end the nightmare was to accept that sacrifice. Lucia was the first to break the silence. I'm willing," he said in a firm voice. "I can't allow this to destroy our lives." Paula looked at her with tears in her eyes. "You can't do it alone, Lucia. We are a team." Marcos and Sergio nodded, but the reality was inescapable. One of them had to be left behind to become the guardian of the door so that others could live in peace. The night of the sacrifice, the group returned to the house. The atmosphere was heavy, loaded with an energy that seemed to absorb light. The priest began the ritual and Lucia prepared to offer himself as a link. While pronouncing the final words, an intense light filled the room and the figure of Mateo appeared once again. His eyes this time reflected gratitude and peace. "Thank you," he whispered. "Now I can rest." Lucia felt her body melted with the light, and a deep calm wrapped her. The others, with a broken heart but relieved, saw how the door closed forever. Chapter 10. The Echo of Silence. The dawn filtered timidly between the branches of the trees, bathing the country house with a golden light that seemed to dissipate the shadows of the night. But for Sergio, Paula, and Marcos, the feeling of relief was bittersweet. Lucia was no longer with them, and the price she had paid for peace was an impossible emptiness to fill. The way back to the town was silent, each lost in their thoughts and memories. The house, now quiet, seemed a place forgotten by time, but on its walls the echo of the lived was recorded. In the days that followed, life tried to resume its course, although nothing was the same. Sergio found in writing a way to channel the trauma, capturing in words the story they had lived. Paula sought comfort in nature, trying to find peace in the beauty that contrasted with the darkness they had faced. Marcos, on the other hand, decided to study the occult, determined to understand and respect the boundaries between the worlds. One night, months later, Paula received an unexpected message on her mobile. It was a photo, the planchette of the Ouija on an empty table, with the word, "Thank you," written in the window of the house, visible through the broken glass. A chill toured his back, but this time it was not fear but of understanding. He knew that, although the door had closed, the echo of that night would continue to resonate in their lives, reminding them that there are mysteries that should not be challenged without respect and caution. Because on the border between life and death, between light and shadow, there is always a whisper waiting to be heard. And sometimes that whisper can change everything. End.